The escape artist, central riddle. They broke the Gustav line. They took Rome. And yet the German army in Italy did not collapse. It slipped away, almost intact, to fight another year. For Allied soldiers, it felt like winning the prize and losing the game. But then something even stranger happened. The closer the Allies came to a decisive victory, the more the front hardened again. So here's the riddle driving this episode. Why did Field Marshal Albert Kesselring manage to withdraw from the Gustav line without being trapped, when the Allies seemingly had the perfect tool to cut him off? And what was the hidden cause, a rival plan, a logistical choke point, a controversial order, or simply the terrain of Italy itself? Italy, the battlefield that eats momentum. Context. Italy was never just a front, it was a machine designed to grind time into casualties. On a map, the route to Rome looks straightforward: drive north up the peninsula. On the ground, it's a narrow corridor of mountains, rivers, and demolished roads. There are few places where an army can move in bulk. And if you defend the bottlenecks, valleys, bridges, ridge lines, you can slow a stronger enemy with fewer divisions. By early 1944, the Allies had two overlapping goals that quietly fought each other. 1. Capture Rome, a political and symbolic prize. 2. Fix German divisions in Italy so they couldn't reinforce France ahead of the coming invasion in the West. Kesselring understood this perfectly. His mission wasn't to win Italy in a dramatic stroke. It was to delay, to force the Allies to pay for each mile, and to preserve enough combat power to withdraw to the next prepared line. The Gustav line wasn't a single trench. It was a defensive system anchored on natural obstacles, especially around Monte Cassino and the Liri Valley, the most direct corridor to Rome. If the Allies could break through and then cut the roads behind the German front, they could turn a breakthrough into a trap. But that required speed, something Italy rarely allowed. Hello, listener, let me know where you're watching from. And if you don't mind subscribing to the channel and giving it a like, I'd be very pleased as the author. Enjoy listening. The key players, and the war each one wanted, motivations. On the German side stood Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commander in Italy, energetic, improvisational, and unusually skilled at turning retreats into controlled, costly withdrawals. He wasn't just reacting, he was managing a defense designed in layers, with fallback positions already surveyed, stocked, and rehearsed. On the Allied side, General Sir Harold Alexander, overall commander, wanted more than Rome. He wanted a decisive operational result, break the German army, not merely occupy a city. General Mark W. Clark, commanding the U.S. Fifth Army, carried heavy pressure, personal, political, and national. Rome offered a headline that no commander could ignore. Lieutenant General Lucien Truscott and other senior field commanders, especially those tied to the Anzio force, faced a brutal dilemma: push deep and risk being cut off, or play it safe and watch the enemy escape. And behind everyone, invisible but decisive, coalition politics. Britain and the United States wanted the campaign to serve broader strategy, but they did not always agree on how. Every major decision came with an unspoken question: who gets the credit, who carries the blame, and who pays the casualties? This was a battlefield where ambition, symbolism, and operational logic collided. The setup: how the Allies planned to turn a breakthrough into a trap, planned to critical point. By spring 1944, the Allied idea, simple in concept, was deadly in execution. 1. Break the Gustav line, finally punch through at Cassino and in the Liri Valley. 2. Use the Anzio beachhead, established behind German lines months earlier, as the knife, drive inland and cut the German escape routes. 3. Force Kesselring's forces into a pocket where withdrawal becomes impossible. This is the kind of operational victory commanders dream of, not just a line broken, but an army ruined. But it depended on timing. If the breakout from the south and the drive from Anzio didn't hit together, if either was delayed by even a day or two, the trap became a door left half open. And an enemy like Kesselring only needs a crack. Here's the overlooked detail: Kesselring built his defense assuming the Gustav line would eventually break. His real goal was to prevent a rout, to withdraw his forces in stages, leaving rearguards to slow the Allies while the main body escaped northward. In other words, the Gustav line wasn't meant to be the end. It was meant to be the toll gate. The decision point, Rome or the cutoff. The order and why it's controversial. The episode turns on one question: what should the Anzio force do when the moment finally came? The classic dilemma, still debated, is this. Option A: drive to cut Highway 6 and key escape routes, aiming to trap German forces withdrawing from the Gustav line. Option B: drive toward Rome, securing the capital quickly but potentially leaving an escape corridor open. One interpretation, common in post-war critiques, argues that the pursuit of Rome weakened the chance to destroy the German army in Italy. The idea is blunt: a city was taken, but the enemy army was not. Another interpretation counters that a bold cutoff was never as easy as it looks on staff maps. The Germans could counterattack the Anzio thrust, the terrain funneled movement into predictable roads, and the Allies risked creating a spearhead too deep to supply and too exposed to hold. Historians disagree on the extent to which orders were explicit, how much discretion field commanders had, and whether a true encirclement was feasible at that moment. But what is not disputed is the outcome: Kesselring got away. And when your enemy escapes, everyone rewrites the plan afterward. The withdrawal that looked like a magic trick, immediate consequences. Once the Gustav line began to crack, the Allies expected a chase. Instead, they ran into a series of delays that felt almost unreal. Bridges blown at the perfect moment. Roads cratered in mind. Artillery positioned to punish every approach route. Rearguards fighting just long enough to stall, then vanishing. This is what a professional withdrawal looks like, especially in terrain that favors the defender. Kesselring didn't retreat in panic. He retreated like an engineer dismantling a bridge while someone is still crossing it. And then came the psychological trap: Rome was close. The closer the prize, the harder it became to ignore. The campaign's narrative, what politicians and newspapers would amplify, shifted from destroy the enemy to take the capital. A document that is still being debated, depending on whose memoirs you trust, lies at the heart of that shift: what exactly was prioritized, and when. Many accounts frame it as a clash between operational encirclement and political momentum. Whatever the intent, the effect was clear: the German army was not trapped. The true cost: months of fighting bought by a few days, costs. The true cost of this decision was horrific, not only in the casualties already paid at Cassino and Anzio, but in what came next. Because when a field army escapes, it doesn't disappear. It reappears on the next defensive line. After Rome, the war in Italy did not end. It shifted north into more mountains, more rivers, more prepared positions, eventually toward the defensive complexes often grouped under the banner of the Gothic line. Costs came in multiple forms. More assaults against fortified terrain. More time with Allied divisions tied down in Italy instead of being available elsewhere. More friction between Allied commands, as post-action blame quietly shaped future cooperation. A line that could summarize the strategic tragedy, paraphrased, might be: we captured the capital, but we didn't capture the enemy. Kesselring's withdrawal turned a potential operational victory into an extended campaign. What else could they have done? Real alternatives. If we strip away hindsight and ask what alternatives were plausible, 3 stand out. 1. Prioritize the cutoff: ruthlessly concentrate Anzio's breakout on roads and junctions that mattered most to German withdrawal, especially the main northbound arteries. Benefit: better chance to force a partial encirclement. Risk: a deep thrust could be isolated, counterattacked, or starved of supply. 2. Exploit with faster, lighter forces: push mobile elements and engineers aggressively to seize bridges, ridge lines, and choke points before the Germans could demolish them. Benefit: creates chaos in a retreat. Risk: Italy's terrain and destroyed infrastructure often made mobility an illusion. 3. Tighter unified command pressure enforced synchronization between the Gustav breakout and the Anzio drive with fewer competing objectives. Benefit: improves the chance of sealing the gap. Risk: coalition warfare rarely behaves like a clean blueprint. Commanders respond to what they see, not to what headquarters imagines. Even with perfect execution, a complete bag of German forces was not guaranteed. Kesselring had prepared fallback lines and knew the ground. But many historians argue that a heavier German loss, especially in transport, artillery, and cohesion, was achievable if the escape routes were threatened more directly. The tragedy is that a narrow window existed. And it closed quickly. Myths, memoirs, and the argument that never ended, controversies. This is where the story becomes a battleground of its own. Post-war memoirs often sharpen the blame. Some accounts emphasize the allure of Rome and accuse commanders of chasing prestige. Others stress the real danger of overextending from Anzio and argue that critics underestimate German defensive skill. Many narratives interpret decisions through personality, especially Mark Clark's ambition, while others point to structural issues, supply, roads, terrain, and uncertain intelligence. One interpretation is that the Allies lacked a single, enforced operational priority in the decisive hours. Another is that the priority existed, but the situation on the ground made it impractical. And then there's the central German fact too many analyses underplay. Kesselring was exceptionally good at this kind of war. He knew how to trade space for time. He understood that a retreat could be a weapon if it preserved the army and forced the enemy to restart the process on the next line. In Italy, the German defense wasn't just concrete and mines. It was decision-making. Answer to the riddle, why Kesselring escaped, conclusion. So why did Kesselring slip away from the Gustav line? Because the conditions favored the defender, and because the Allies' victory contained a built-in distraction. Italy's geography made fast encirclement extremely difficult. German layered defenses allowed retreat without collapse. Allied objectives diverged, destroy the army versus seize Rome. Logistical friction, wrecked roads, blown bridges, exhausted units, killed tempo at the exact moment tempo mattered most. And above all, Kesselring executed a controlled withdrawal with discipline, using rearguards and demolitions to turn Allied momentum into a slow grind. In the opening, we asked how an army could lose a line and still win time. This is how. You don't defend one position as if it's sacred. You defend the calendar. You defend the enemy's patience. And you make every victory feel like the end, until the next ridgeline proves it wasn't. Because in Italy, the Allies didn't just fight Germany. They fought the terrain, the clock, and a commander who knew how to escape.